One thing that's really important with all four-stroke engines is making sure your valves are within spec. So I'm going to show you how to check the clearance of the valves on this 2006 CRF250, but most of them, all four strokes, are pretty much the same. So one of the most important things when it comes to checking your clearance is to make sure you know the proper clearance. And you can get this information. It should be in your owner's manual. That's where this came from. So the valve clearance of the 2006 CRF250 intake valve plus or minus 0.3 millimeters. So we're looking to get 0.12 millimeters. And on the exhaust, we're looking at 0.28 plus or minus 0.03 millimeters. The reason we're going to stick with millimeters is because we buy our shims in millimeters. The engine was built in millimeters. The Japanese use millimeters when they figure it all out, so that's how we're gonna stick with it. We're gonna take the valve cover off. We've already got the spark plug boot out of the way. It's just easier. The gentleman who actually owns this bike, he is restoring the bike, so he took the motor out. So I said, yeah, bring it over, we'll check your valves while the motor's out, because he's redoing the frame, you know, all the plastic, redoing the bike. It's just a bike he wanted to redo. So we'll pull the valve cover. All right, just like that. Nice and easy. All the seals look good. And there's witness marks on these motors. So we're gonna turn the motor to top dead center. So there's witness marks on this motor. There's little ticks on the timing chain. So it needs to be set at top dead center, and the valves need to be in the right spot. So we're gonna, oh, a little far. But you can see very clearly that our little tick there is perfectly flat in line, and the same on this side, or right here. You can see it in line with the top of the cylinder head. There's a secondary check with these motors. If we pull this out, there's gonna be two witness marks in there, and they need to also be in line. If not, that means your motor is out of time and your valves aren't at the proper setting when you check it. So we're gonna crack this sucker open and see. It's actually pretty loose, and I didn't loosen it. So somebody has opened this up. All right, we'll show you guys exactly, we'll zoom in. All right, so you can see there's a little dot right there. You see that little dot? I hope you can. And then that has to line up with this little triangle. So they're pretty much in line, almost perfect. So I would say that this motor is at the proper spot right now that we need to check these valves. So what you're gonna need is a set of feeler gauges. They're basically just really thin pieces of metal that come in a kit. And we're lucky that our kit has both imperial measurements, right, for thousandths, and metric measurements. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look on the intake side first and try and hit that 0.12, like it says here in the paperwork. So we're gonna find the right feeler gauge, start sticking it in, and we can be plus or minus 0.03 millimeters. We're gonna check out what it actually is. We have our exhaust valves, and our intake valves are underneath here. These are the cam lobes that open and close and put pressure on the valves. Now, the intake valves are supposed to, the intake valves are supposed to be 0.12 millimeters of clearance. We have a 0.10, and it's tight. We can't get it. So the valves are a little bit out of spec on the intake side. We're gonna keep going smaller, and we're gonna see what actually fits, because we need to know that in order to do the math. 0.7 does go. It's tight, obviously. Goes on the one side, not on this side. It's real tight. So you can see the lobes are pointed back. That's where you want them. Towards the carburetor. So what we're finding is that we have about 0.076 on the right side intake. It's tight, it slides, I can make it go, it's good. And that's 0.003 thou. Now this is supposed to be 0.005 thou. So we're 2 thou too tight, and we're only allowed to be 1 thou too tight. So we'll have to adjust that one. Now the left side is way too tight on the intake. So it is at less than the smallest gauge I got, which is 0.0015 thousandths of an inch. So we're gonna have to measure what's in there, put one in and adjust it. We're gonna check the exhaust now as well. So the exhaust is supposed to be 0.28 or 11 thou, and it's not. So we're gonna have to figure out what it is. All right, let's try 8 thou, see if it goes. Yep, it does go. About 9. 9 goes, but it's tight. 10. Ooh, 10 won't go. So she's 9 thou. So our next step is going to be removing the tensioner. There's a seal washer behind it. And this releases the tension on the timing chain. So we can actually get out the valve shims. Just going to give them a little tap. One. There's a lot of little parts, guys. We don't want to lose any of them. Give this other one a little tap. These are all torqued down, obviously. Everything in your motor is. It's not a hand-tight situation. Sure that all the guides, if they come out, you need to have them. When we're removing the hold downs that hold these together, there's a tiny little ring. You see that? There's like, it's not here on this one because it's in the hold down. The other one is here. You need to make, you're like super careful not to lose these down there. If they fall down in, you'll be taking your whole motor apart to try and get it back together. So we're gonna take these off, remove them so we don't lose them, so that we can reassemble this motor properly. They're not held in very hard. It's a matter of just grabbing it and removing it and keeping it with the hold down. So there we go. But number one thing, do not lose those. So one of the trickier parts is then removing the timing chain. You can actually lift up on it and pry it over, because you can move with those keepers out of the way. You can slide the camshaft over. There we go. I'm just gonna put a screwdriver to hold our timing chain out so I don't have to dig it out of the bottom of the case. Just like that. So now we have these caps, I'll show you. So there's these caps here. This is what rides against the lobes on the cam. We have to remove these caps, and underneath them is the shim. There's the shim up in there. You can see it. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to break it all down and do a mathematical thing on the screen for you. But we need to record these numbers of 2.53. So that's important. 0.53. That's that valve. Put it back over there. We'll record this one to see if it's the same. 2.53. We'll check it a couple times. A couple different spots. 2.53. Perfect. So they're both identical. We're trying to solve for A. So A is B minus C plus D. So what A is, A equals the new shim, right? It's gonna tell me that size. B is the clearance you have, like with your feeler gauges. You're gonna check that and you're gonna record that number. Then C is the clearance you want. So in this case, for example, on the exhaust side, the clearance I want is 0.28 and the clearance I have is 0.254. So I want 254 minus 0.28 and it's going to give me a negative number. Then I'm going to have that negative number plus D, which is how thick the old shim was. And that's going to tell you how thick your new shim needs to be. In order to get the exhaust shims out, we simply lift the roller back. We'll use a magnet because we do not want to drop these down in the motor. Now we simply replace the old shims with the new shims of the correct size and reassemble this back together. The reassembling is the pain in the butt part because you have to get the timing back. Making sure that you're in the correct timing position is the tricky thing. There we go. Timing chain's back on. We're just gonna, before we reinstall everything, one thing we're gonna do now is check our clearance. So what we're doing now is we're just gonna apply pressure and we're checking with our 5 thou feeler gauge. It's darn near perfect, I'd say. Feels really good. So it just barely passes. We're gonna check it again, plus or minus a thou. So we're gonna go to the 4 thou, the 5 fit, so we'll go to the 6. We'll see if it fits. Six does, sorta. It's tight. We'll check 7. No, and 7's not fitting. Check it from the other side just to make sure. Oh. No. 7 won't fit. So 6 does, so we're within that 1 thou plus or minus. So that's good. So we'll go ahead and reinstall the keepers. Again, being super careful not to drop it down into the motor, because that would be a disaster. Reinstall the holder, getting them lined up. So they're gonna line up when the keeper slides in. We're just gonna snug these for now. We'll have to get the torque spec so we can put them to the proper torque. The torque spec on our book calls for 12 foot-pounds on these, and that's crucial, guys. Make sure you have a good torque wrench. We're gonna reinstall our timing tensioner. So we've checked our timing marks. If your timing marks line up here, but don't line up in the inspection windows, then you've adjusted your chain wrong. And you're gonna need to take it back apart and readjust by putting the chain on properly. But ours is lined up perfect, so we're gonna keep moving forward by putting the valve cover on and putting the spark plug back in. I like to put the spark plug in now, just for the straight up fact as I don't want any dirt or anything that might still be on the valve cover to get in there. So I'm just gonna snug the spark plug in now. It makes it a lot easier. So it doesn't hurt also to put a little grease. This one still has quite a bit of grease on it, but it doesn't hurt to put a little grease on that rubber seal. It's a rubber seal because it's meant to come off, guys. You're meant to inspect these as part of your maintenance. It's just a matter of getting it to seal on that spark plug boot properly. get down on there. Come on. Just like that, sort of. Well guys, as you can see, readjusting and checking the valve clearance really isn't that difficult. If you're lucky, you do your check, everything's still within that 1 thou spec or so many mil, and then you can simply leave it alone, put the valve cover back on. That takes 2 seconds to do and should be done whenever you're changing your oil. Really, it's a couple seconds. As far as replacing the shims, buy yourself a shim kit. If you're riding a 4-stroke, you're gonna need one of those shim kits. Local shops probably have them in your area. They'll have all sorts of different sizes of shims, so you can spec out the bike on what you need. And if you don't need the whole kit, you can buy like a small stack of 3 or 4 of a certain size shim from the shim companies, like Hot Cams, or all the companies are making them. Anyway guys, hopefully that helps somebody. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.